In order to be prepared for higher education, we need to take a glimpse into the world through the eyes of those living it. Hi, I'm your host, Ashreya Sirivol. I have questions about the future, which is why I am going to deep dive into the journeys of college students and graduates, exploring the majors and paths they've chosen. Welcome to Scholar Stories, the podcast, where we bring you practical advice and inspiring stories. It's time to invite Isaac Sanchez, an incoming senior of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, to the podcast. He is majoring in computer science and engineering. A graduate from Lick Wilmerding High School in San Francisco, California, Isaac has experience in software engineering, data analysis, teaching, volunteering, and more. Welcome, Isaac.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Hi Isaac. It's great to have you here. Can you start by telling us what sparked your interest to pursue computer science and engineering at MIT and what exactly it entails?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just to start off, I wanted to say that when I came to MIT, originally I had plans to be a physics major. So what that just means is that I had to switch majors sometime in my first few years of MIT. But originally I was very much conflicted on the different majors I could possibly have, right? I really wanted to do something with math. I wanted to do something with science. So I thought physics would be a good route to go. And then I took my first few physics classes in college, and then I realized that it might not be the right path for me. I noticed that there was a lot of complicated math that wasn't really necessary. So I ended up switching over to computer science because it also involved a lot of really complicated math, but I felt that I could actually apply a lot of the stuff that I was working with. So when I'm thinking about computer science involves a lot of math and just critical thinking skills on how to apply different things like data structures and different algorithms. And what an algorithm is just a set of equations or a set of processes that you might want to kind of do in a specific order. So it's a lot of just trying to figure out and solve puzzles. And computer science, I thought, was going to be one of the more interesting majors because you can directly apply it to a lot of interesting things. You know, you can't really directly apply a lot of the abstract math of physics to, everyday tasks or just like how you could with computer science. So I thought that that was kind of the biggest draw for me.
Yeah, science sounds like a super interesting subject, especially because I love solving puzzles too. And I know that your decision was the right choice for you choosing computer science over physics. So I also know that MIT is at the forefront of artificial intelligence research. Could you share some exciting AI projects or research initiatives that you've been involved in or witnessed during your time there?
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't had much experience with research. I have applied a few times to a few of the research labs on the campus. I know that, for example, there is this research lab called CSAIL, which stands for, I think, Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. I know they have a lot of really cool projects that are, like you said, on the forefront of a lot of these AI research questions. Yeah, I suppose they do a lot of work involving what is known as reinforcement learning, trying to basically teach AI models to interact with the world and trying to basically solve a bunch of these problems that maybe a robot might have if they ever, built one for that specific task of just like moving around the world, for example.
That's a really cool AI project, especially teaching it to interact with the world. But other than being at the hub of computer science, MIT is also far away from California. Moving from California to around Boston for college must have been quite a transition. Can you tell us about your move and how you've been adjusting to life there?
Yeah, so my time in California, I guess I spent the first 18 years of my life there. And so that's basically all that I knew, right? I didn't really explore too much around. My family couldn't afford to go on many vacations, for example, to other states or other countries. So I mainly stayed in California for the first 18 years of my life. And then moving to Massachusetts was a little difficult for me, just because I had to basically start fresh. I didn't know anyone there. I had to figure out my housing situation and how I would afford everything. I had to figure out a lot of different things in terms of moving. Basically, I would move as much as I could fit in my suitcase at the time, which was kind of maybe a bad idea in hindsight, just because I didn't need absolutely everything. I felt that I bring everything that I could. But I would recommend that if you ever go into a college that is far away from your home, to leave most of your stuff at home. Really just only bring the things that you absolutely need. So things like clothes or, just devices that you might need. And just basically start fresh if you possibly could, just because that was my experience there.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind when I go to college. But it's great that you adjusted so well, especially because you stayed in California for so long. Other than that, I know that you have significant teaching experience. How did you get those opportunities and how did they shape you?
Sure, yeah. So right now I'm working with the company called Inspirit AI. Actually, that's how I met you. And Inspirit AI basically teaches machine learning and artificial intelligence to high school students and beyond. And yeah, I've been working with this company for about 3 years at this point. And for those 3 years, I've basically know the curriculum down to every single little detail that we have to teach, including a lot of details that I kind of also throw in just because I do know a lot about the space in terms of AI and machine learning. But yeah, I didn't really consider teaching to be something that I wanted to do. It's one of the many things that I'm considering when I graduate to actually end up doing, which is just teaching and maybe working with other companies other than InSpirit. But yeah, I guess this kind of passion for teaching started off in high school. It was one of my many extracurriculars that I did in high school, which was I ended up tutoring middle school students for a few years. I think it was something on the order of 2 to 3 years. And yeah, I would basically teach middle school students once a week who were English second language speakers. So most of the time, they mainly spoke in Spanish, but I would also, speak to them and try to basically give them extra help that their schools may not have been able to provide. So that was something that was very rewarding for me. And I would build up a lot of good bonds with my former students.
I know that you are a great teacher, especially because you're my teacher at Inspirit AI, and I loved having you. It's so cool that you got to teach many students. So, speaking of your high school, which you taught middle school students at, I know that Lick Wilmerding is a private school. Do you think it helped with any opportunities such as honors, advanced, or AP classes that you took? And how do you think those courses were important for your college applications?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And when you mentioned AP classes, I remember that actually I was surprised that my high school didn't offer a single AP course. Instead, what we had was just a bunch of, honors courses that we had that were mainly just for advanced placements. You know, you were especially good at math, so you would be placed in the honors version of the course. So, like, I took honors calculus, for example, my senior year, and I took honors pre-calculus the year before that. But in terms of these courses, I think the content is very similar across the board in many schools. That I don't think they really too much of a deciding factor for colleges to say, yeah, this is a good student or not. I think many high schools offer very similar courses. Um, I think the main difference, though, was that I decided to challenge myself by taking as many of these honors courses as I possibly could within reason. It was a bit of a struggle for the was trying as many advanced courses as I could during high school, but I think I still ended up learning a lot. And I think that was the biggest thing. And, unfortunately, my school didn't offer any AP courses, meaning that I couldn't take any of the AP exams, or maybe I could have, but I decided not to. And I think that's something to learn from. Which is that colleges usually try to judge you based off of your opportunity. In my case, I didn't have any opportunities to take AP courses, so they didn't really consider it too much in my applications. Yeah. Instead, they really looked at my honors courses.
It's amazing that you took so many honors at like calculus and learned a lot. So continuing on the note of your high school, I know that you are a Questbridge finalist and college prep scholar. Can you explain what those honors and awards are and how you were able to achieve them?
Yeah, of course. For the College Prep Scholar, I got that in my junior year when I think Questbridge offers a short program for students who are first generation students to learn how colleges work. And so I went to Stanford's campus and they basically had a presentation on, to apply to college, what resources are available to me, how financial aid works, and how a bunch of these questions that I just literally had no answers to until I went to that conference. So that award was, I'm not too sure if it was really a real award, but they still gave me something for participating in all of those and just trying to learn how to go to college. In terms of the Questbridge finalist stuff, that was because I applied using the Questbridge application. For those of you who may not know, Questbridge is this application that you can do if you're a low income but high achieving student, where you can potentially win a scholarship from Questbridge to go to these colleges and basically go without paying a single cent of tuition, which is a super sweet deal. I really recommend it for anyone who maybe comes from a family that struggles with finances, for example, to really apply with Questbridge. And I was a finalist, but I never actually got the scholarship because I think it was very competitive. And I was in one of the final rounds, but I didn't actually get anything. But a lot of the colleges that are on this application do offer a lot of good financial aid. So schools like MIT, for example, pay essentially all your tuition if you don't make enough money or your family doesn't make enough. Yeah, so that's what happened with me. I was a finalist. I didn't get the scholarship, but MIT instead gave me the scholarship. And I hear a lot of other schools do something very similar.
It's so great that you were able to apply to these colleges and how MIT gave you the scholarship because now you're at a top-notch university. So, can you share your experience with standardized tests like the SAT and how do you think they helped you apply to competitive schools like MIT?
Yeah. So I remember that in my junior year, I was starting to worry a little bit about the those standardized tests like the SAT or the ACT. I wasn't sure which one I wanted to do, and I think online I found um, a few samples how the ACT or SAT goes. And I remember those practice exams that I took, I didn't do too well on. I especially did very poorly on the ACT, where I timed myself and I did everything I could, and I did pretty poorly on it. So I decided to do the SAT instead during my junior year and senior year. I took it a few times just because my first few scores were not that great, or at least not great compared to the greater pool of applicants that was trying to apply to these colleges. So I think I ended up with a 1400 on my first run, and then eventually I ended up with a 1500. And I didn't end up actually, um, getting a perfect score like many of my other colleagues from MIT did. So I got a 1500 out of 1600. And I think that was a good enough score for these kind of high end colleges. But yeah, it kind of bummed me out when I first saw my scores just because I was like, oh no, I'm not doing perfectly. This is going to really lower my chance. But I think a lot of these colleges started to phase out a lot of these exams. And yeah, that's something I've heard recently. And I think that overall, that might be a good idea just because it's a little bit weird to try to evaluate how a student is doing based off of this number of the SAT score, the ACT score. I think it's kind of putting all of these people into categories that is kind of unfair, I believe, just because not everyone learns the same information. We might be better at some things and other things, but I think these days, though, you might still want to do the SAT or ACT just because it does showcase that if you do get a good score, that you can submit that and be like, yeah, look, I'm doing very well here. So I think that is a good option to kind of pursue.
Yeah, that's really great advice, but 1500 out of 1600 is still a really good score. So, can you also share research or internships you've done and how you were able to get those opportunities?
Sure, absolutely. I guess in high school, around my sophomore or junior year, I was thinking about different opportunities that I could do in terms of extracurriculars. I wasn't thinking about them in terms of if this would get me into college or not. Instead, I was thinking about them as could I actually do something cool with this? I found a few opportunities over my years where in my junior year, or I guess maybe this was the summer after my sophomore year of high school, I ended up working at Stanford University because they had a program for engineers and scientists, or I guess up and coming engineers and scientists. I believe the program was called RISE, which is, I think, stands for Raising Interest in Science and Engineering or something like that. But they basically paired me up as a high school student with a physics lab where I ended up working alongside some very interesting research that they were doing at Stanford. And then the next year, I did the same program, and that time I was paired up with SLAC, so the linear accelerator at Stanford, where I ended up kind of working alongside some of these leading researchers in particle physics. So both of those opportunities were given to me by this kind of program that they had. I think if you wanted to find your own kind of research program or maybe some way of doing some sort of internship or research, a lot of colleges offer some programs for high school students to kind of come in and do some things like that. I think MIT does the same thing, and maybe not for research exactly, but maybe for other things like just generally looking at these colleges and seeing how they kind of work and maybe participating in a few classes and things like that. I would recommend to check with your local colleges and see what they might offer. Eventually, at the end of my senior year, I worked at Cisco. So Cisco Systems, specifically in cybersecurity. Around this point, I was starting to get interested in computer science. So I kind of shifted from physics to computer science, and I ended up working there as a cybersecurity intern, which was a pretty cool experience. I got to work alongside a lot of interesting people. And yeah, for that one, I had to apply very early on just to get a candidate position for that.
Wow, from these internships, I can tell that you are very accomplished in science, technology, and data analysis. I also know that you volunteered at Desmos. Can you share more about what Desmos is and how the experience volunteering there was?
Yeah, absolutely. Desmos, as I'm sure many of you have used before, is a graphing calculator that you can use on the internet, and it's very interactive. And yeah, when I was in high school, I was thinking about ways in which I can basically contribute to some of these really cool projects, or in these really cool companies that I admired. So Desmos, yeah, I reached out to them. I literally just emailed them and said, hey, I'm a high school student and I'm looking for volunteer experience. Can I maybe work alongside you guys in doing some sort of research project? And they were very kind, and basically because they were located in San Francisco, they allowed me to come over to their office, meet the team, and also allowed me to work on a cool little project that involved location data and seeing how over time maybe how the data changed, and where maybe there were some hotspots of people using Desmos at a certain time, maybe how that would influence the way that the infrastructure that Desmos was using would, yeah, that's something that they're kind of considering. Yeah, I really think that was a really valuable experience, especially since I wasn't exactly paid for it because I did want to volunteer for this, and I made that explicitly clear. And I think anyone can get some volunteering experience if you think that a company's really cool. You can probably email someone and, volunteer for that company to kind of work through with that.
Yeah, that sounds super cool, especially because I also use Desmos a lot at my school. And it's so amazing how you just emailed them and was able to volunteer. So, with your background in software engineering and data analysis, how do you think AI is enhancing these fields? And what skills do you believe are essential for students looking to specialize in AI-driven technologies?
Yeah, so for AI, we see that there's a lot of development in how it's being used in software engineering, where you can literally go to ChatGPT, for example, and then ask it, hey, can you program me a neural network? And that takes in this kind of input and gives me this kind of output. And it will completely code it up for you, regardless of what package you might be using and things like that. For that specific task. And yeah, I think in a lot of different ways, these kinds of AI driven technologies are, um, democratizing a lot of information. That is to say, a lot of us may not necessarily understand coding at such a fundamental or high level that we can still try to learn through these AI models that are trying to teach us. Or I guess if you ask it to teach you, it's going to give you some code. And I think it's good for just starting out. And what you might see is that in the future, a lot of people say that AIs might a lot of these jobs in computer science because they're really good at programming now. Imagine in just a few years. I still have my doubts about that. I think it's mainly going to be reserved for lower level coding. So things that, beginners might do because there's still a lot of kind of technical and logistical approaches to different problems that might require humans still for a long, long time. But yeah, AI is I think, a very interesting field in these days, just because it's being used all over the place for generating results to different kinds of scientific questions, for example, or helping in scientific progress. And I really recommend looking into more about how AI is being used. I wouldn't trust all the hype just because I think a lot of people are trying to ride the bandwagon and just are trying to get money for things like AI. But yeah, more often than not, we see a lot of good potential applications of AI, maybe in things like medicine or in chemistry, biology, physics, even, or just helping out in everyday common tasks. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, especially because AI is becoming a huge part of our lives, as you said. I now know that you've been participating in many activities, helping the community, and strengthening your skills. How do you manage to balance your time, and do you do anything fun when you have free time?
Yeah, time management is a pretty difficult skill, at least for me, and it's essential skill once you are in college and you need to balance things like your time that you're doing schoolwork, maybe time for yourself and friends, and your social life, and balancing time if you're doing work on the side, like I am, for example. And one really big recommendation that I always give out to people is to use a calendar or a planner or something like that. That helps me organize all of my activities and also lets me visually see how much time I'm spending on each thing and how much time I'm giving myself to just, do things that I want to do. Alongside all these other things that we might be doing. Yeah, I guess in my free time, I do a couple fun things. Like for example, I'm in a couple of bands here in the Boston area where I play a lot of lead and rhythm guitar. Yeah, guess for context, I am a musician and I do a lot of my own writing and I write with a lot of the bands that I'm with. And um, yeah, basically try to come up with something that is pretty cool. And I think it's very fun to do that kind of performance work. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how you balance your time so well, like how you allocate time for different activities, and you have guitar to let off steam at the end of the day. I can relate to that because I also play the violin, and it's so nice to have an instrument to just play when I have free time. So, for students applying to college, what do you think was the strongest thing on your college application?
Yeah, so there's many different parts to your college application. I think for me personally, the strongest thing was probably my essay. And I think spending a lot of good time on writing out an essay will definitely look really good for colleges. I wrote my essay about tutoring and how I felt like I was giving back to my community. And I think that showcased that I was really caring about my community and the ways in which I could kind of contribute to the culture at these different colleges. So, yeah, I really recommend, once you are starting to apply to college, to look at some of the questions that, you may be asked for your essays and to basically get started as soon as you possibly can, coming up with ideas, writing things down about your life, and different moments that made you feel very passionate about something or that really gave you purpose, and just really writing as much as you can about that, especially because that's something that the colleges are looking for. Right? They're looking for people who are passionate about what they do and that actually enjoy doing things. Don't just write about something because you feel forced to do it. Write about something that you actually do care about. For me, that was tutoring in high school. And also, I talked a little bit about physics in my essays as well, when they asked me questions about some of my passions. But yeah, basic recommendation, right? Just start as soon as you possibly can. That way, you have enough time to really finish up, craft a good essay. I think I started a little bit too late and I only had a month to finish up all my entire essays, which was not a good idea. I had to stay up every night just because I basically pushed myself into a corner where I had to do all my schoolwork at the same time as I was doing my application work. So, giving yourself some time during the summer, for example, will be really good to start to work with your applications and things like that. But yeah, the strongest thing in my application was definitely my college essay.
Thank you for that advice. It's awesome how you were able to write about how you gave back to your community. Finally, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about your journey or any final words of encouragement for students getting ready to apply to college?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my final words would be that, anything is really possible if you put your mind to it. I saw a lot of students who got discouraged because, they may not have gotten the best scores or maybe the best grades um, possible, or maybe that they haven't had that many extracurriculars and things like that. But I just want to say that, even though a lot of things may seem kind of bleak, especially because college is very much a gamble, it's still very possible to get to places where you will feel very happy. It doesn't have to necessarily be a top college either. Honestly, I have a lot of friends who are in a lot of local colleges that aren't, the big names like MIT, Stanford, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, and things like that, who are actually doing much better than some of my colleagues from those top universities. Just because you end up at a college that maybe you weren't too excited about doesn't mean that you're not going to have a good time. Um, it's really you make the most out of your possible situation, and in that case, right, regardless of where you end up, you will probably end up being pretty happy and meeting pretty cool people. At least that's what I've seen. It doesn't really matter where you end up.
Thank you so much for that, Isaac. Those were some really inspirational words. It has been great having you on the podcast today. Your ability and passion to do so many activities relating to computer science and physics has inspired me to push myself more and delve deeper into the depths of AI. We're all so excited to see what you'll accomplish after you graduate next year from MIT. For our listeners, if Isaac's journey has inspired you to pursue a similar path, take his advice and look for internships and volunteering opportunities. Remember, the journey to college is unique for everyone, and exploring different majors and career paths can open up exciting possibilities. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to stay tuned for more inspiring stories from different college students and graduates. Until next time, this is Ashreya Sirvol signing off from Scholar Stories.